Hey, race the first part of your story, packed with tension, unexpected turns, and a gripping confrontation. Each section will escalate, keeping the intensity high. I came home earlier than usual that day. No reason, just one of those gut feelings that makes you change course without understanding why. I had planned to stay late at work, finish up reports, maybe grab a drink with a coworker, but something kept nagging at me. So, I took the elevator down, got in my car, and drove home without overthinking it. The house was dark when I pulled into the driveway, which was odd. Emily's car was there, parked slightly crooked, like she had pulled in too fast, distracted. That was the first thing that felt off. The second was the front door. It wasn't locked, not wide open, but just barely closed, like someone had rushed inside and didn't bother making sure it latched. I stepped in and the air smelled different. Not bad, not good, just different. Like perfume that didn't belong to her, mixed with something faintly sour, like sweat. I called out her name. Silence. The quiet wasn't normal. Even if she was home alone, there'd usually be some sound, music, the hum of the TV, her voice on a phone call. But there was nothing. Then, a sound. A quick shuffle from upstairs, like someone moving too fast, too suddenly. My pulse kicked up a notch. I wasn't the paranoid type, but something was wrong. My feet moved before my brain caught up, taking the stairs two at a time. At the top, I turned towards our bedroom, the door slightly ajar, and then I heard it whispering. Urgent. Panicked. The next 5 seconds stretched forever. I pushed the door open hard enough that it hit the wall with a loud thud. And there she was. Emily. Standing in front of our closet, the door barely cracked open behind her as if she had thrown herself in front of it to block whatever or whoever was inside. Her face went pale. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like she was searching for an excuse. But her brain couldn't produce one fast enough. My eyes flicked from her to the closet, then back. Who's in there? My voice was steady, too steady. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, but I refused to let it show. And no one, she stammered, swallowing hard. What are you doing home? Wrong answer. Completely wrong answer. If you ever want to lie convincingly, at least pretend to be happy to see the person you're lying to. I didn't ask again. I stepped forward, but she grabbed my arm, her grip tighter than I expected. Wait. I shook her off and yanked the closet door open. And that's when I saw him. A man. Some random guy, shirtless, crouched in the cramped space between my shirts and her dresses. His breath coming in short, sharp bursts, like a trapped animal. He had a beard, messy hair, the kind of face that probably looked good under different circumstances. Not now. Now he just looked pathetic. For a moment, none of us moved. No one spoke. It was like all three of us were trying to process it at the same time, but from completely different perspectives. Then Emily let out this nervous, half-hysterical laugh. This isn't what it looks like, she said. And that almost made me laugh too. Because there are only a few times in life when you hear that exact sentence and none of them end well. Packed with intensity and raw emotion. The tension keeps escalating. For a few seconds, none of us moved. The man in the closet was frozen like a deer in headlights. Emily stood rigid with her back against the wall, and I just stared. The weight of what I was seeing hadn't fully settled in yet. It was like my brain was buffering, trying to connect the dots even though the picture was painfully obvious. I took a slow step forward and the guy flinched. Actually flinched like he expected me to take a swing at him. That alone told me something. He wasn't some innocent friend, some misunderstanding. He knew exactly what this looked like because he knew exactly what he had done. I turned to Emily. So, you want to tell me what's going on? Or should I ask him? She crossed her arms, defensive, but I saw the way her hands shook. It's not what you think. I let out a short, bitter laugh. Emily, there is a half-naked man hiding in my closet. Explain to me exactly what else this could be. She hesitated for too long. Long enough that the guy decided to make a move. He scrambled out of the closet, raising his hands like I was holding a gun to his head. Look, man, I don't want any trouble, he said, voice shaking. I turned my glare on him. Trouble? You're hiding in my house, in my closet, next to my wife. I think you passed trouble about 5 decisions ago. Emily suddenly found her voice. I can explain. Then explain. I folded my arms, staring her down. She opened her mouth, then shut it again, looking at the guy, then back at me like she was weighing her options. And that pissed me off more than anything. Because the fact that she was thinking about what to say meant that the truth wasn't something she wanted to tell me. I exhaled sharply and looked at the guy again. Who the hell are you? He swallowed. Jason. Jason. Great. A name to put to the face of the guy screwing my wife. How long? I asked Emily, ignoring Jason completely. She blinked. What? How? Long. My voice was calm, too calm. Emily looked away. That was answer enough. I clenched my jaw and took another deep breath, forcing myself to stay composed. You know what? No. I don't need to hear this from you. I turned to Jason. You tell me. How long have you been sleeping with my wife? Jason went even paler, glancing at Emily like he was waiting for her permission to speak. I snapped. Oh, don't look at her. She's already made her choices. You tell me. He licked his lips, nervous as hell. A few months. Emily sucked in a sharp breath, like she was offended that he admitted it, like she still thought she could talk her way out of this. I nodded slowly. A few months. I turned back to Emily. That's interesting, because a few months ago you told me you were going through a phase, that you were just stressed out, that you needed space. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, realizing there was nothing she could say that would make this look any better. Anything else? I asked Jason, tilting my head. Anything you want to confess while we're all here? He hesitated. I didn't know she was married at first. That made me laugh. Cold, humorless laugh. At first? When did you find out? Jason shifted uncomfortably. A few weeks in. I shook my head. And you just kept going? He had the nerve to look ashamed. Yeah. Emily finally snapped. Can you stop interrogating him like he's a criminal? This is between us. I turned to her, my patience officially gone. No, Emily. You made it about him the moment you let him into our house. Into our bedroom. She groaned, dragging a hand down her face like I was the one being unreasonable. You weren't supposed to come home early. I laughed, stepping back. Oh, I ruined your fun? Sorry about that. She rolled her eyes, like this was some stupid argument over the dishes. Jason took that as his cue to bolt. I should go. No kidding, I muttered, stepping aside and gesturing toward the door. He practically ran out of the room. A second later, I heard him fumbling with his shoes downstairs, then the front door slamming shut. That left just me and Emily. She crossed her arms again. So what now? I stared at her, actually stunned by her tone. You say that like you still think this is your decision. She sighed dramatically. Okay. So I made a mistake. That word, mistake, set my blood on fire. You don't trip and fall onto another man for months, Emily. This wasn't a mistake. It was a choice. Repeated choices. And you didn't even have the decency to end things first. She threw up her hands. Oh, come on. Like you're some perfect husband? Like I'm the only one who ever screwed up. I blinked. Oh, do tell. What exactly have I done that compares to this? She hesitated. Because she had nothing. I shook my head. That's what I thought. Silence. Then, after what felt like forever, she shrugged. I don't love you anymore. It was so blunt, so casual, that I almost laughed. She kept going, completely unfazed by the look on my face. Let's get a divorce. I stared at her for a long, long moment. Then I smiled. With pleasure. And the second I said it, something in her expression shifted. Just slightly. A flicker of what? Surprise? Annoyance? Regret? But I didn't give her the satisfaction of asking. I just turned around, grabbed my keys and walked out the door. And that was the moment I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Where things take an unexpected turn. The tension keeps building and Emily's true nature starts to show even more. I didn't go back that night. I couldn't. Not after what I just walked in on. I got in my car and just drove. No destination, no plan, just the open road and a head full of rage, confusion, and something else I didn't want to name. Because if I let myself name it, I'd have to admit it was pain. And I wasn't ready for that. I stopped at a gas station after an hour, sat in the parking lot, and just stared at the steering wheel. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. I ignored it. Then it buzzed again. And again. I finally glanced at the screen. Emily's 6 missed calls. I let it ring the 7th time, watching her name light up like a warning. I wasn't ready to hear whatever garbage excuse she had prepared. Not yet. Instead, I called my best friend, Matt. He picked up on the second ring. Dude, it's almost midnight, he groaned. This better be good. I let out a breath. Emily cheated on me. Silence. Then, what? His voice was fully awake now. I caught her. In her house. With some guy named Jason. Another pause. Are you serious? I wouldn't joke about this. A sharp exhale. Where are you? Some gas station off the highway. Stay there. I'm coming. I didn't argue. I just sat there, staring at nothing until his car pulled up next to mine 20 minutes later. Matt took one look at me and swore under his breath. Jesus, man. I got out of my car and he pulled me into a quick, rough hug the kind guys give when they don't know what else to do. Then he stepped back, studying me. You want to go get a drink? Or do you want to throw something? Because I can make both happen. I let out a short, bitter laugh. I don't even know what I want. Well, you're not sleeping in your car. He clapped a hand on my shoulder. Come crash at my place. We'll figure it out in the morning. I didn't argue. The next day, when I finally checked my phone the next morning, I had over a dozen missed calls and texts from Emily. Some were aggressive. We need to talk. You're being ridiculous. Ignoring me isn't going to fix anything. Some were weirdly casual, as if she was trying to pretend this wasn't a huge deal. Hey, let me know when you're coming home. Do you want me to grab groceries? And then there was the last one. I don't understand why you're acting like this. That one made me laugh. Acting like this? Like she wasn't the one who blew up our marriage? Matt glanced over my shoulder, reading it. Wow, gaslighting and groceries in the same breath. Impressive. I shook my head. She actually thinks I'm the one overreacting. She's panicking, Matt said simply. People like her, they never think they'll get caught. And when they do, their first instinct is to manipulate the situation. She's trying to get control back. It made sense. Too much sense. I exhaled sharply and typed out a reply. I'll be home later. Don't talk to me until then. She responded instantly. Okay. Nothing else. No argument, no excuses. Just that single word. And for some reason, that made me even more uneasy. Later that day, when I finally pulled into the driveway, my stomach twisted. This was still our house. Still filled with our stuff. But it didn't feel like mine anymore. I stepped inside, half expecting to find her sitting on the couch, waiting. Instead, she was in the kitchen, pouring herself coffee like it was just another day. She barely glanced up. Oh, you're back. I stared at her. What exactly did you expect? She shrugged. I don't know. I thought maybe you needed more time to cool off. I let out a short laugh. You cheated on me, Emily. In our house. Do you seriously think I just needed a cool-down period? She sighed, setting her mug down. Look, I said I was sorry. No, you didn't. She blinked. What? You never said you were sorry. She opened her mouth, then closed it again, realizing I was right. Instead of apologizing, she had been making excuses, downplaying it, trying to shift the blame. And I saw it then, the full truth. She wasn't sorry. Not for what she did. Not for betraying me. She was only sorry she got caught. I clenched my jaw. You said you don't love me anymore. That you want a divorce. She hesitated. I was angry when I said that. I raised an eyebrow. So you don't want a divorce? She bit her lip, thinking. Actually thinking about it like she was weighing her options. And that's when it hit me. She hadn't planned on leaving. She had planned on keeping this going for as long as possible, lying to my face, sneaking around behind my back. I took a slow step forward. Tell me the truth, Emily. If I hadn't caught you, how long would this have gone on? She looked away. That was answer enough. I shook my head, my chest tightening. You don't love me. You just love having me. She scoffed. Oh, don't be dramatic. I stared at her, actually stunned. Dramatic? I'm done, I said, my voice cold. I'll talk to a lawyer this week. She frowned. Wait, what? You asked for a divorce. And I'm giving you one. Her whole expression shifted, panic flashing across her face for the first time. Wait, just can we talk about this? I laughed, shaking my head. Unbelievable. Now you want to talk. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. I don't think you're thinking this through. I've never thought more clearly in my life. She grabbed my wrist, desperate now. You're just hurt. We can fix this. I pulled my hand away. No, you broke this. And I'm not picking up the pieces for you. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. For the first time, she realized she was losing. And she did not like that. I turned and walked away, heading for the door. And I swear, as I stepped out, I heard her whisper under her breath, "He's serious." She finally understood. And for the first time since this nightmare started, I felt in control. Where things take an even more unexpected turn. The tension, manipulation, and psychological warfare escalate. I didn't stay at the house that night. Couldn't. Not with her still there. Acting like this was just another bump in the road instead of the end of the damn highway. Instead, I drove back to Matt's place, and for the first time in days I actually slept. Not well, but enough. When I woke up, my first instinct was to check my phone. Emily, 2 missed calls, 1 voicemail, 3 texts. I hesitated, then played the voicemail. Her voice came through, softer than usual, like she was trying to sound vulnerable. "Hey, I don't know what to say. I didn't mean for it to get to this point. I was just lonely, I guess. Not that that's an excuse. I don't want to lose you over this. Can you just come home so we can talk? Please." I let out a slow breath. It wasn't an apology. Not really. Just more excuses, more vague reasoning, more her. I deleted the voicemail. Matt walked in stretching. "You gonna see her today?" "I have to," I muttered. "I need to start figuring out how to split things up." He nodded. "Want backup?" I smirked. "Nah, I can handle her." Later that day, I walked into the house, half expecting her to be waiting by the door, ready to ambush me with another speech. But the place was quiet. Too quiet. Then I saw her sitting on the couch with a glass of wine, her phone in one hand. She glanced up. I slightly read, but I couldn't tell if it was from crying or just exhaustion. "You came," she said softly. "I didn't sit. I told you I would." She stared at me for a long moment, then set her phone down. "I don't want to fight." "Neither do I." She exhaled, looking at the wine glass like it held answers. "I screwed up." I raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, you did." Her jaw tightened slightly, as if she didn't like me agreeing so quickly. "I don't even know why I did it," she continued, her voice carefully measured. "I mean, Jason didn't mean anything." I almost laughed. "Then why risk everything for him?" She hesitated, and for the first time I saw something real flicker across her face. Frustration. Not with me, with herself. "I don't know," she admitted. And that made me pause. Because that almost sounded honest. Almost. I shook my head. "Doesn't matter now? I already made my decision." Her eyes darted up. "Are you sure?" I narrowed my gaze. "Are you?" She swallowed, then forced a weak smile. "We don't have to do this, you know." "Do what?" "This divorce thing." She stood slowly, stepping toward me. "We've been together for so long. It doesn't have to end like this." I tilted my head. "You mean it doesn't have to end on my terms?" Her expression didn't change, but I saw the flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "I just think we should really think this through." I stared at her for a long moment. "You were so sure yesterday." She exhaled, then shrugged. "People say things in the heat of the moment." I couldn't help it, I laughed. A short, bitter sound. "That's rich coming from you." Her jaw tightened again, and suddenly the facade cracked. "Okay, fine," she snapped. "You want to do this? Let's do this." She crossed her arms. "You think leaving me is going to make you happier?" I blinked. "What?" She scoffed. "You think you're just going to walk away, start fresh, and everything's going to be perfect?" I clenched my jaw. "I think I'm going to walk away from you. And that's enough." She let out a sharp laugh. "Wow. You really think you have the upper hand here, don't you?" I frowned. "Emily, what the hell are you talking about?" She tilted her head, studying me. Then she smirked. "And that sent a chill down my spine. I just wonder," she mused, "how much you're willing to lose over this." Something in her tone made my stomach twist. "Emily." She took a slow sip of her wine, then smiled. "You know, we built a lot together. This house, our accounts, our lives." She met my gaze, her expression unreadable. "Are you sure you're ready to split it all up?" I stared at her. "Are you threatening me?" She laughed again, shaking her head. "No, of course not." But she didn't deny it. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to stay calm. "I'll get a lawyer. We'll divide things fairly." Her smile didn't fade. "Fairly." She rolled the word around in her mouth like it was some foreign concept. "You really believe in fair, don't you?" I didn't respond. She set her glass down and stepped closer. Too close. "I don't lose, you know." I exhaled sharply. "Emily, this isn't a game." She smiled again. "Everything's a game, sweetheart." And that's when I knew. She wasn't scared of losing me. She wasn't even sad about what she'd done. She was just pissed that I wasn't playing the way she expected. I took a slow step back. "See you in court." Then I turned and walked out. And as I closed the door behind me, I heard her whisper, just barely loud enough for me to catch. "We'll see." I should have felt victorious. I should have felt relief. But all I felt was a deep, unsettling dread, because Emily wasn't done playing. And something told me I hadn't even seen her worst yet, where Emily's manipulation escalates and the battle truly begins. I should have known she wouldn't just let this go. I should have expected the mind games, the manipulation, the twists, but I was still holding onto some naive belief that, at the end of the day, she would at least be rational. I was wrong. Started 2 days after I left. I had been staying at Matt's place, getting my head together, talking to a lawyer, and trying to figure out how to start untangling my life from Emily's. I hadn't gone back to the house since that last conversation, and I had no intention of doing so until I had legal protection in place. And then I got a call. Not from Emily, from my boss. I was at a coffee shop when my phone buzzed, and I almost ignored it, until I saw the name. I stepped outside before answering. "Hey, Greg," I said cautiously. "Hey," he replied, voice stiff. "Listen, is everything okay?" I frowned. "What do you mean?" There was a long pause. I got an email this morning. An anonymous email. About you." My stomach dropped. "What kind of email?" Another pause. "You should probably just come in. We need to talk." I ended the call and stood there for a second, heart pounding. I already knew. I knew. Emily. At the office, Greg was waiting in his office when I arrived, arms crossed, looking uncomfortable. He gestured for me to sit, then turned his monitor toward me. I leaned in, eyes scanning the email. It was long, anonymous, like he said, but the message was clear. It accused me of everything. Workplace misconduct, aggressive behavior, even harassment, all wrapped up in careful wording. Nothing outright slanderous enough to be dismissed outright, but just enough to cast doubt. My hands clenched into fists. "Greg," I said slowly, "this is insane." He exhaled. "I know, and if it was just some random email, I'd delete it and move on." But he hesitated. "But," he clicked something else. A second email popped up, and this one had my company email attached. It was a fabricated exchange between me and a fictional employee. In it, I looked like a complete psychopath. Condescending, aggressive, even threatening. It was fake. So fake. But someone had taken the time to make it look real. I stared at the screen, rage boiling under my skin. "This isn't real," I said flatly. Greg nodded. "I figured. I've known you for years. But HR is getting nervous. We can't just ignore this." I clenched my jaw. "You know who sent it, don't you?" Greg sighed. "You think it's your wife?" I laughed darkly. "Ex-wife. And yes." He ran a hand through his hair. "Look, I'll do my best to shut this down. But this is messy. If more stuff like this starts popping up..." "I get it," I muttered. And just like that, I realized exactly what Emily was doing. She wasn't just divorcing me. She was going to war. The confrontation. I drove straight to the house. I knew it was stupid. I knew I should have gone through my lawyer. But I was done. I pulled into the driveway and marched up to the door. I didn't knock, I had keys. I threw the door open. Emily was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. When she saw me, she barely even blinked. "Oh, you're back," she said, her voice casual. I shut the door behind me, slowly. "You tried to get me fired." She set her phone down and stretched lazily. "I have no idea what you're talking about." I stepped closer. "Don't play games, Emily. You sent fake emails to my boss." She tilted her head, eyes sparkling with something I did not like. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured. "Do you have proof?" I stared at her. She smiled. And that's when I knew. She had planned this. She had set this up weeks ago, maybe even months. She wasn't just covering her tracks, she was destroying mine. "You're insane," I whispered. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on her knees. "No, honey. I'm just better at this than you." I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. "Why?" She laughed. Laughed. "Because you're leaving me." She shrugged. "And I don't lose." "You cheated," I hissed. "You did this. And now you want to punish me for walking away." She sighed dramatically. "Oh, don't be so sensitive. You'll be fine. Maybe you'll even get a better job after all this." I turned away, running a hand down my face. I couldn't believe this. I couldn't believe this was my life. Then I spotted something on the counter. A stack of papers. My name on them. I strode over and picked them up. My blood went cold. Bank statements. Legal documents. My credit score. She had been digging through my finances. She had been planning something. "What are you doing?" I asked, voice tight. She didn't even try to hide it. "Just weighing my options." I turned to face her. "You want a war?" My voice was low, dangerous. "You've got one." She smirked. "Oh, sweetheart. You're already losing." I turned on my heel and walked out. I wasn't going to win this by arguing. I was going to win this by being smarter than her. This wasn't just a divorce anymore. This was a battle for survival. Where the real battle begins. Emily escalates, but now I start fighting back. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her voice. That smug, condescending voice telling me I was already losing. That smirk, the way she leaned back like this was all a game to her. I had spent the past week reacting. Taking the punches. Watching her manipulate, lie, twist everything to make herself the victim. But I wasn't going to let her set the rules anymore. It was time to hit back. The first thing I did the next morning was meet with my lawyer, Dan. He was an older guy, mid-50s, with a sharp mind and a reputation for being ruthless in court. Exactly the kind of person I needed. I sat in his office going over everything. The cheating. The fake emails. The way she had been digging through my finances. Dan listened carefully, nodding every so often. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair, tapping a pen against his desk. "Well," he said finally, "your wife's a real piece of work." No argument there. He smirked. "Good news is she's sloppy. She thinks she's untouchable, but she's making mistakes." I sat up. "Like what?" "She's moving too fast. She's trying to burn you down before the divorce is even filed. That tells me she's scared. Probably worried about money, assets, maybe even her own reputation." He pointed his pen at me. "That means she's hiding something." My stomach tightened. "Like what?" "That's what we're going to find out." Digging for dirt, I spent the next few days gathering everything I could on Emily. Bank statements, credit card bills, emails, anything that might show she had been moving money around or preparing for something. And then I hit gold. An old email buried under months of junk from a divorce attorney. Dated nearly a year ago. I sat back, staring at the screen. She had been planning this long before Jason. Long before I ever suspected anything. The cheating? That wasn't a mistake. That was just the part where she got caught. I sent the email to Dan immediately. He called me 5 minutes later. "This changes everything," he said. "This proves premeditation. If we can connect this to her financial activity, we can argue she's been funneling assets in preparation for the divorce." That's fraud. A slow, cold satisfaction spread through me. She thought she was playing chess. She didn't realize I had just put her king in check. The next move, I didn't confront her right away. That's what she wanted. She wanted to see me angry, see me lose control. So I played it cool. I acted normal. I even responded to one of her texts with a simple, "We'll talk soon." I wanted her to feel comfortable. Then, the day before our first official divorce meeting, I made my move. I went to the house when I knew she'd be home. Walked in like nothing was wrong. She was in the kitchen, sipping another damn glass of wine. She smirked when she saw me. Decided to come crawling back? I smirked right back. Not exactly. She tilted her head. "Then what's this?" I pulled out a folder and slid it across the counter. She hesitated, then picked it up, flipping through the pages. I watched her face carefully. The slight widening of her eyes. The way her lips parted. Just for a second. Before she controlled herself. "You've been busy," she said, voice even. I shrugged. Figured I should know who I'm dealing with. She closed the folder and set it down. "So what? You think this changes anything?" I leaned in, lowering my voice. "I think it scares you." Her fingers twitched against the counter. A tiny, involuntary movement. I smiled. "Got you." She forced a laugh. "Oh, sweetheart. You're adorable when you try to play dirty." I didn't blink. "And you're pathetic when you realize you're losing." Something flickered in her expression. Anger. Real anger. And then, for the first time, she cracked. She grabbed the folder and threw it across the room. Pages scattered everywhere. "You think you're better than me?" she shouted. "You think you're going to walk away from this and win?" I stepped back, calm. "I don't think I'm going to win, Emily." I smiled. "I know I am." She was breathing hard now, fists clenched. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." I leaned in slightly. "Neither do you." And then I walked out, leaving her standing in the middle of our kitchen, surrounded by the mess she had made. For the first time since this nightmare started, I felt good. She wasn't invincible. She wasn't untouchable. She was scared, and I was just getting started. Where Emily gets desperate, and the battle takes a darker turn. I should have known she wouldn't take that last conversation lying down. I should have expected the retaliation, the next move in her little war. But even after everything, after the cheating, the lies, the manipulation, even after she tried to ruin my career, I still underestimated just how low she was willing to go. That was my mistake. The accusation, the first sign that something was wrong, came 2 days after I confronted her. I was at work, sifting through emails, when my phone buzzed. A number I didn't recognize. I answered. "Hello, Mr. Carter?" a woman's voice asked. I frowned. "Who's asking?" "This is Officer Daniels with the local precinct. We need you to come down to the station for a few questions." My blood went cold. "Questions about what?" A brief pause. "It would be better if we discussed this in person." I sat there, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I already knew. I knew. "Emily." At the station, I called Dan on the way over. He answered on the first ring. "Tell me you didn't kill her," he joked. "Not yet," I muttered. "But she's trying to kill me. I just got a call from the cops. They want to ask me questions." His tone sharpened. "Do not say a word without me there. I'm on my way." I arrived at the station and was led into a small, windowless room. 2 detectives sat across from me, one flipping through a file, the other watching me like I was already guilty. Detective number 1 cleared his throat. "Mr. Carter, do you know why you're here?" I folded my arms. "I have a pretty good guess." Detective number 2 tapped the folder. "Your wife, Emily Carter, filed a police report against you yesterday." I exhaled slowly. "And what exactly is she accusing me of?" Detective number 1 hesitated. "She claims you've been following her, showing up uninvited, making threats." I laughed. Couldn't help it. "You have got to be kidding me." Detective number 2 didn't smile. "Are you saying she's lying?" "I'm saying she's setting me up," I snapped. "She's trying to manipulate the divorce. She cheated on me. She tried to ruin my career. And now she's trying to make me look dangerous." They exchanged a glance. They didn't look entirely convinced, but they also didn't look ready to throw me in a cell. "Not yet." "Do you have any proof that she's lying?" I leaned forward. "Do you have any proof that she's telling the truth?" Silence. Then Dan walked in, calm as ever. "Gentlemen," he greeted, setting his briefcase down. "I trust you're not wasting my client's time." The detectives shifted slightly, then closed the file. "For now, we're just gathering information." Dan smiled. "Good. Then here's some information for you. My client is not a stalker, nor is he a threat. In fact, he's the victim of a calculated smear campaign. I'd advise you to be very careful about how you proceed." More silence. Finally, Detective number 1 sighed. "We're not pressing charges at this time. Just keep your distance from your wife." Dan stood. "Don't worry. She's the one who should be worried." The aftermath. As soon as we stepped outside, I turned to Dan. "What now?" He rubbed his chin. "Emily's playing dirty. That means she's desperate. And desperate people make mistakes." I clenched my jaw. "How do we stop her?" Dan smirked. "By beating her at her own game." That night, I started preparing for war. I gathered every text, every email, every single piece of evidence that could prove Emily was the real manipulator. I even dug into Jason, the guy she cheated with. And what I found? Well, let's just say Emily wasn't the only one keeping secrets. This fight wasn't over. It was just getting interesting. Where I take control and Emily's world starts to unravel. I didn't go home that night. I couldn't. Not when I knew she was still out there, playing her sick little game. The accusation at the police station wasn't just a warning shot, it was a declaration of war. And if she thought I was just going to sit back and let her destroy my life, she was about to be very disappointed. Digging for dirt. Dan was right. Emily was desperate, which meant she was sloppy. She was throwing every weapon she had at me without thinking about the consequences. That meant it was time to start looking in places I hadn't before. So I started with Jason, the guy she had risked everything for. The man who had been in my house, in my bed, and then ran like a coward when I found him. Up until now, I had been so focused on Emily that I hadn't thought much about him. But something wasn't sitting right. Emily wasn't the kind of person who threw herself into something without a reason. She was calculated, always 2 steps ahead. And yet, Jason didn't seem like the kind of guy she would risk it all for. He wasn't rich. He wasn't powerful. He wasn't even particularly smart. So what was it about him? I decided to find out. Jason's dirty secret. It didn't take long. A few calls, a little online digging, and then jackpot. Jason wasn't just some random guy. He was married. married, with 2 kids. And the best part? His wife had no idea about Emily. I sat back in my chair, staring at the screen. My heart was pounding. But this time, it wasn't from anger. It was from opportunity. Because now I had leverage. The call that changed everything. I found her number easily enough. Lisa Reynolds. I hesitated for maybe half a second before dialing. She answered on the 3rd ring. Hello, Lisa? My name is Daniel Carter. We don't know each other, but I have something you need to hear. A pause. Okay. Are you married to a man named Jason Reynolds? Another pause. Then cautiously, yes. Who is this? I took a deep breath. I hate to be the one to tell you this, but your husband has been having an affair with my wife. Silence. Then a sharp intake of breath. Excuse me. I didn't sugarcoat it. I told her everything. How I caught Jason hiding in my closet. How Emily had lied, manipulated, and tried to destroy my life. How Jason had run away, leaving her to deal with the fallout. By the time I finished, Lisa was breathing heavily. I don't, she let out a shaky laugh, but there was no humor in it. You have proof. I have plenty of proof. She was quiet for a long moment. Then her voice dropped. I want it. Consider it yours. A slow exhale. Then, with quiet rage, thank you. I hung up. And just like that, Emily and Jason's little fantasy world started to crumble. The fallout, it took less than a day. The next afternoon, I got a text from an unknown number. Unknown, you piece of shit. What did you do? I smirked. Me? I introduced your wife to mine. They had a lot to talk about. Unknown. You don't understand what you've done. Me? Oh, I understand perfectly. A few minutes later, Emily called. I let it ring. Then she texted. Emily, you think you're so clever? You think this is over? Me, oh, sweetheart. It's just getting started. That night, I poured myself a drink and waited. Because Emily was about to learn a very important lesson. She wasn't the only one who knew how to play dirty. Where Emily's world truly starts to collapse, and she begins to realize that she is the one losing now. I didn't hear from Jason again after that last text. But I heard from Lisa. She called me the next morning, her voice steady but edged with quiet fury. I just thought you'd like to know. Jason packed his bags and ran like a coward. I wasn't surprised. She exhaled sharply. I threw him out. He's trying to act like it's not a big deal, that it was just a mistake. But I'm talking to a lawyer. He's finished. Good. A pause. Then Emily's next, isn't she? I smiled. She always was. Lisa let out a short, humorless laugh. Give her hell. And with that, the final phase of this war began. The turning point. Emily had spent weeks trying to manipulate, trying to control the narrative. But now, she was on the defensive. It started small. She stopped texting as much. Stopped trying to bait me into fights. The smugness in her voice had faded the last time we spoke. She knew. She had felt the shift. But the real turning point came 2 days later. I was at Dan's office going over paperwork when his assistant poked her head in. Mr. Carter, she said, hesitant. Your wife is here. I raised an eyebrow. Ex-wife. Dan and I exchanged a look before he nodded. Let's hear what she has to say. I followed his assistant out to the lobby. And there she was. Emily stood near the entrance. Arms crossed, sunglasses perched on her head. She wasn't wearing her usual smug expression. No confident smirk. No calculated charm. She looked tired. I walked over, keeping my voice cool. Didn't expect to see you here. She inhaled through her nose. We need to talk. I tilted my head. Oh? Because last time we talked, you were threatening me. Something about me already losing? Her jaw tightened, but she didn't take the bait. Can we sit somewhere private? I folded my arms. I think we're fine right here. She hesitated. I saw it then, the moment she realized she wasn't the one in control anymore. Her shoulders dropped slightly, and for the first time in years, Emily did something I never expected. She looked nervous. I don't want this to get worse, she said quietly. I stared at her, genuinely stunned for half a second. Now you don't. She exhaled. You're making things difficult. I laughed. Oh, I'm making things difficult? I stepped closer, lowering my voice. Emily, you tried to ruin my career. You tried to make me look like a threat. You sent the cops after me. And I'm the difficult one. She looked away, biting the inside of her cheek. I was angry. No, you were losing. And you still are. Her gaze snapped back to me, frustration flickering across her face. It doesn't have to be like this. I smirked. You're right. It could have been so much worse for you. A long pause. Then finally she swallowed. What do you want? I leaned against the wall, pretending to think. Well, first, I want you to stop with the fake accusations. And second, I want you to accept the divorce terms exactly as they are. No fighting. No dragging this out. No games. She stared at me. And if I don't? I smiled. Then I finish what I started. She held my gaze for a long moment, lips pressing into a thin line. Then, slowly, she exhaled. Fine. I nodded once. Smart choice. And just like that, the game was over. Emily had finally lost. But the best part? She knew it. The final part. This is where everything comes full circle. I expected Emily to break things off cleanly after that last conversation. She had agreed to the divorce terms. She had finally accepted that I wasn't backing down. And for a moment, I thought it was over. I was wrong. Because Emily wasn't the type to bow out gracefully. She was the type to go down swinging. The final move 3 days after our last conversation. I got a call from Dan. We have a problem, he said immediately. My stomach tightened. What now? He sighed. Emily's stalling. She's refusing to sign the final papers. I let out a bitter laugh. Of course she is. She's not fighting the terms, Dan clarified. She's just not signing. I rubbed my temples. So what? She's just dragging this out for fun. Looks like it. I clenched my jaw. Emily knew she had lost. She knew she couldn't change the outcome. But instead of taking the loss and moving on, she was doing what she always did, trying to control me. Even if she couldn't have me, she wanted to own my time. Make me wait. Make me suffer. I exhaled sharply. How do we force her hand? Dan was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that changed everything. She's still living in the house, right? I frowned. Yeah. And her name's not on the deed? My eyes widened slightly. No, I said slowly. It's not. Dan let out a small chuckle. Then I think it's time for Emily to find a new place to live. The eviction, I didn't waste time. That same day I had Dan draft a formal notice of eviction. It was completely legal. Emily had no ownership over the house, no financial claim to it. And since we were still technically married, she couldn't claim spousal rights to it yet. I wasn't just divorcing her. I was kicking her out. The moment the notice was finalized, I drove straight to the house. Emily was home. I could see her car in the driveway. I knocked once before stepping inside. She was in the kitchen, pouring herself another glass of wine. She glanced up, barely reacting. Oh, you again, she muttered. I didn't respond. I just walked up to the counter, pulled out the eviction notice, and slid it across to her. She frowned, picking it up. Her eyes flicked across the page, and then, just for a split second, her fingers tensed. I saw it. The exact moment she realized what I had done. She slowly set the paper down and looked at me. You're evicting me? I leaned against the counter. You won't sign the divorce papers. So now you're out of my house? A long pause. Then she let out a sharp laugh. Wow, you're really enjoying this, aren't you? I smiled. You have no idea. She narrowed her eyes. You can't just throw me out. I tilted my head. Legally? I can. Her jaw clenched. Where the hell am I supposed to go? I shrugged. Not my problem. Her face twisted. You think you've won? She hissed. You think this makes you the better person? I leaned in slightly, lowering my voice. I don't need to be the better person, Emily. I just need to be the free one. Her nostrils flared. For the first time, she didn't have a comeback. She didn't have a trick up her sleeve. She was cornered. I turned and walked toward the door, leaving her standing there, holding the eviction notice with white-knuckled fingers. And just before I stepped outside, I heard her whisper something. A single word. Please. I froze. It wasn't angry. It wasn't manipulative. It was just weak. I turned back. She was staring down at the counter, her face unreadable. But her posture, her whole presence, felt small. And for the first time, I saw it. She wasn't just angry. She was afraid. Not of me. Of being alone. I took a deep breath. You made your choices, Emily. She closed her eyes for a second. Yeah, she muttered. I did. Silence. Then softly, I didn't think you'd actually leave. That hit me in a way I wasn't expecting. Because the way she said it, she meant it. I swallowed. That's the problem. You never thought I'd leave. You thought you could do whatever you wanted. And I'd just stay. She looked up. And if I had asked you to stay? If I had actually fought for us instead of all this. I stared at her for a long moment. Then, quietly, it wouldn't have mattered. Her face flickered with something, regret. But it was too late. I turned and walked out the door. And this time, she didn't try to stop me. The final goodbye a week later, she signed the divorce papers. No more stalling. No more games. I never saw her again after that. She left the house a few days later, moving out quietly. No dramatic scenes, no last-minute pleas. Just silence. And just like that, it was over. Not with a bang. Not with screaming or revenge. Just over. And as I stood in my empty house, the place that once felt like a home, I realized something. For the first time in years, I could finally breathe.